Hey guys, tonight we begin with a topic the ancient Egyptians took very seriously and sometimes very weirdly: sex. From sacred rituals to surprisingly frank poetry, this civilization was more open, creative, and frankly experimental than most people today might be after 2 glasses of wine and a horoscope reading. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Tonight, we journey far back in time to a land bathed in golden light, where the desert winds carry whispers of ancient lives. Let your mind drift as we explore the intimate world of the pharaohs and their people. Chapter 1: The Foundations of Desire, Society, Spirituality, and the Divine Spark. Close your eyes for a moment and picture ancient Egypt. You might imagine grand pyramids, serene pharaohs, or the slow, steady flow of the Nile. But beneath that iconic surface, you'd find a culture with a refreshingly frank and open approach to something many societies, even today, still tiptoe around. Forget the hushed whispers and uncomfortable euphemisms you might associate with historical periods. For the Egyptians, sex wasn't hidden behind closed doors. It was part of nature itself, as undeniable as the sun rising over the eastern desert or the annual, life-giving flood of the Nile. Feel the gentle warmth on your skin, the imagined dust motes dancing in the light as you sink into this ancient understanding. Imagine standing there on the banks of the great river, the air warm and dry, carrying the scent of rich earth and blooming papyrus. You watch as a farmer guides his plow, his movements rhythmic, purposeful. The soft thud of his feet on the fertile soil, the distant cries of ibises, all contribute to a sense of timeless calm. Nearby, children play, their laughter carried on the breeze, a sound as fresh and innocent as any today. There is no sense of shame, no underlying tension about the cycles of life, and that included the very human cycles of desire and procreation. The gods did it, the farmers did it, the nobles did it, and crucially, no one felt the need to invent shame about it. It was simply part of the fabric of existence, a natural outpouring of life. This wasn't some wild, unrestrained hedonism, mind you. It was a deeply ingrained philosophy, a part of their cosmic balance, known as Ma'at. Ma'at was the principle of truth, justice, order, and harmony that governed the universe. It permeated every breath, every action, every thought. And sexuality, in its most fundamental sense, was an integral thread in that harmonious tapestry. Think of it like this. Fertility meant crops. Crops meant food. Food meant survival. And survival meant the continuation of the kingdom, the people, and the divine order. Every new life, whether a flourishing stalk of wheat or a wailing infant, was a testament to Ma'at. So if your sex life was healthy, productive, and pleasurable, the gods were probably smiling upon you, their benevolent gaze affirming your adherence to the natural order. If not, well, perhaps it was time to light a candle to Hathor, the goddess of love, music, and joy, and consider incorporating more honey into your diet. A simple, practical solution for a practical people, even in matters of the heart. This quiet adherence to cosmic balance meant that even the most intimate aspects of life were imbued with purpose and dignity. This remarkably open attitude permeated every aspect of Egyptian life. You'd see it reflected in their art, where depictions of fertility gods were common, not scandalous. Imagine vibrant paintings on tomb walls, not hiding, but celebrating the generative forces of the world. You'd hear it in their literature, surprisingly frank and beautiful, speaking of love and desire with a directness that might surprise you. Their medicine, their daily interactions, even the architecture of their homes, often designed with private areas for intimacy, all reflected this grounded acceptance. Feel the cool mud brick against your hand, the sense of privacy and comfort within a designated space for personal connection. Imagine living in a world where your social value wasn't chained to what you did or didn't do in bed. Instead, it was tied more to how much land you had, how bountiful your grain harvest was, or whether you managed to keep your linen robes sparkling white under the unforgiving desert sun, a symbol of cleanliness and prosperity. There were no mass puritanical movements, no complex hierarchies based on who did what with whom. Unless your actions directly involved property disputes or someone else's wife, ancient Egypt largely didn't obsess over celibacy or punish people for engaging in the natural act of sex. It was a matter of practical consequence, not moral judgment, fostering a society where individual freedom intertwined with collective well-being. And why this unique perspective? You can largely thank the gods, who frankly set the tone by making it part of their divine job descriptions. They weren't just remote, all-powerful beings, they were passionate, sometimes chaotic, and often very physical entities who modeled the very human experiences of love, desire, and creation. They were not distant ideals, but relatable, albeit immensely powerful, beings. Let's delve into their divine antics, shall we? You can almost hear the soft rustle of papyrus, the distant echo of ancient hymns, as we explore these fascinating tales. Their stories served as guiding narratives, legitimizing human desires and relationships within a sacred context. Our story of divine sexuality begins with Atum, the original solo act. According to the Heliopolitan creation myth, Atum, who existed alone in the primordial waters of Nun, a vast dark cosmic ocean, created the world not through a grand external act of will, but through an act of, shall we say, enthusiastic self-involvement. Imagine a cosmic alone time, filled with pure determination, a boundless energy swirling within him. From this singular generative act, he produced Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. Yes, the Egyptian universe literally began with a one-god show and bodily fluids. This wasn't scandalous, it was revered. Atum's creative energy, his generative power, was seen as the ultimate assertion that life, in all its forms, begins with desire. There was no need for fig leaves, no awkward silence. If the gods didn't blush, why should anyone else? Their actions set the precedent for human behavior, removing the veil of shame from natural processes, and establishing a profound cosmic link between desire and creation. Then there's the poignant and powerful tale of Osiris and Isis, ancient Egypt's royal couple, whose story is a testament to love, loss, and the ultimate triumph of resurrection and procreation. When Osiris was cruelly murdered and dismembered by his jealous brother Set, the devoted and utterly determined Isis embarked on a desperate quest to reassemble his body. She traversed the land, her feet dusty, her heart heavy with grief, searching for every scattered piece. She found all of him, well, almost all. One crucial part, central to his ability to procreate and ensure the divine lineage, was missing, tragically lost to the river. So, what did she do? With incredible resolve and potent magic, she crafted a substitute phallus, a symbol of ultimate creation, revived him long enough to conceive their son, Horus, and thus the divine bloodline continued. This wasn't just a story of love, it was a profound narrative about creation overcoming chaos, about the essential link between sexuality, fertility, and eternal life. Their act, born of necessity and deep affection, further solidified the sacred nature of procreation in the Egyptian worldview. It was a powerful message. Even in death, the generative force could be rekindled, life springing forth from the most dire circumstances, a miracle driven by unwavering devotion. Next, consider Min, the god of fertility and male potency, whose depictions left very little to the imagination. He was often shown standing tall, crowned with lettuce leaves, a curious yet significant symbol we'll revisit later, holding his most recognizable feature proudly in hand. Ancient statues and carvings of men were direct, celebrating the raw power of male procreative force. Imagine seeing these statues in public spaces, not hidden away, but displayed openly, their message clear and unmistakable. Shrines dedicated to men often featured ritual lettuce offerings, symbolizing fertility and, quite frankly, acting as a sort of ancient Viagra, reinforcing his role in ensuring abundant life, both agricultural and human. His presence was a constant reminder of the blessings of virility and the sacredness of generation, a visible representation of life's essential drive, ensuring the bounty of the land and the proliferation of its people. And for those who sought pleasure, joy, and connection, there was Hathor, the glorious goddess of love, music, dancing, and drunken joy. Often depicted nude or semi-nude in her art, she embodied everything pleasurable about human connection: the sensuality of a dance, the thrill of desire, the infectiousness of laughter, and the subtle art of seduction. Next, consider Min, the god of fertility and male potency, whose depictions left very little to the imagination. He was often shown standing tall, crowned with lettuce leaves, a curious yet significant symbol we'll revisit later, holding his most recognizable feature proudly in hand. Ancient statues and carvings of men were direct, celebrating the raw power of male procreative force. Imagine seeing these statues in public spaces, not hidden away, but displayed openly, their message clear and unmistakable. Shrines dedicated to men often featured ritual lettuce offerings, symbolizing fertility and, quite frankly, acting as a sort of ancient Viagra, reinforcing his role in ensuring abundant life, both agricultural and human. His presence was a constant reminder of the blessings of virility and the sacredness of generation, a visible representation of life's essential drive, ensuring the bounty of the land and the proliferation of its people. And for those who sought pleasure, joy, and connection, there was Hathor, the glorious goddess of love, music, dancing, and drunken joy. Often depicted nude or semi-nude in her art, she embodied everything pleasurable about human connection: the sensuality of a dance, the thrill of desire, the infectiousness of laughter, and the subtle art of seduction. Her image was one of warmth and welcoming, a divine invitation to embrace earthly delights. Festivals held in her honor were vibrant, boisterous affairs, filled with music, wine, and uninhibited revelry, essentially ancient tinder gatherings with tambourines, where people celebrated life, love, and indulgence. She was the divine patron of pleasure, reminding everyone that joy and intimacy were not only permissible but divinely sanctioned, a gift from the cosmos, a joyful counterpoint to the more somber aspects of existence. Even the sun god Ra, mighty and all-encompassing, had moments of reproductive importance, though usually involving creation through speech or spitting, which is only slightly less weird than Atum's solo performance. The point is, the gods modeled sexuality as divine, necessary, and sometimes a little experimental. They didn't separate the sacred from the sensual, they merged them. Their divine narratives provided a framework for humanity. Desire was natural, creation was good, and there was no inherent shame in the body or its functions. They showed a universe where physicality and spirituality were intertwined, where the act of creation, whether cosmic or human, was always sacred. The very air they breathed, the water they drank, and the land they tilled were infused with this divine understanding of interconnectedness. So, as you rest, imagine a world where the act of love was not just tolerated, but celebrated, where the rhythms of the body mirrored the rhythms of the cosmos, where the divine and the human were not separated by an unbridgeable chasm, but intertwined, reflected in every sunrise, every flood of the Nile, and every new life brought into the world. This profound understanding of sexuality as a force of creation, pleasure, and balance set ancient Egypt apart, shaping a society where intimacy was simply a part of the grand harmonious design of Ma'at. Let your breath deepen, feeling the gentle rise and fall of your chest as we prepare to explore how these divine principles trickled down into the everyday lives of ordinary Egyptians far from the temples and royal courts. Feel the calm spreading through your limbs, a sense of peace descending as you surrender to the comfort of your surroundings. Chapter 2. Love in the Delta. Everyday affection and domestic bliss. While the gods might have been crafting magical phalluses or engaging in enthusiastic self-involvement, most Egyptians were just normal people with normal relationships, trying to find time for intimacy between feeding the livestock and, of course, avoiding crocodiles. Imagine the hot, dry air, scented with dust and the faint aroma of the Nile. The sun, a relentless eye in the sky, dictated the rhythm of their days. Far from the grand, idealized scenes of pharaonic monuments, life for the average Egyptian was practical, grounded, and often beautifully simple. Unlike their more dramatic deities and occasionally incestuous royalty, the average Egyptian's love life was remarkably down-to-earth. Imagine for a moment the golden light of the setting sun illuminating a small mud brick home by the Nile. You can hear the distant bleating of goats, the murmur of voices, the soft clatter of pottery. The scent of baking bread wafting from a nearby oven, warm and inviting, signals the close of another busy day. This was the stage for most Egyptian relationships, far removed from the grandeur of temples and the intrigues of the palace, a stage where intimacy unfolded naturally, without pomp or pretense. If you were a farmer, your hands rough from the soil, calloused from years of toil. A potter, shaping clay into useful vessels, feeling the cool, wet earth squelch between your fingers. Or a linen worker, your fingers nimble from weaving delicate threads. Chances are your romantic endeavors revolved around simple, practical matters. Who lived nearby, within a reasonable walk or boat ride? Who made good beer, a vital commodity for refreshment and social gatherings? And perhaps most practically, who still had all their teeth by age 30, a sign of health and longevity in a time before advanced dentistry? These were, by modern standards, modest benchmarks, certainly, but they were eminently reasonable in a world where survival was a daily effort, and a healthy partner was an invaluable asset. Relationships were built on shared labor, the comfort of knowing someone worked beside you, shared meals, the simple pleasure of breaking bread together, and, ideally, shared affection, a warmth that transcended mere utility. You can almost feel the warmth of the hearth on your face, the earthy taste of simple, wholesome food, as couples navigated their days together, bound by necessity and often genuine tenderness that blossomed from shared hardship and mutual support. This quiet companionship formed the true bedrock of their society. Couples slept in the same bed, their bodies accustomed to the contours of one another, sharing the quiet intimacy of the night, the rustle of straw beneath them. They raised children together, the sounds of little feet and childish chatter filling their homes, blending with the daily hum of activity. And yes, they even snuck the occasional love note onto potsherds, literal shards of broken pottery, repurposed as ancient texting surfaces. Imagine finding a piece of pottery, perhaps a discarded beer jar, with a message like, "I dream of your beauty by night." This wasn't flowery, overly romantic prose. It was direct, heartfelt, and entirely relatable. It tells you something fundamental about their values. Even in a world of hard work and simple living, where every moment was accounted for, the yearning for connection, for beauty, for shared dreams was ever present, a quiet fire burning in the heart. These were small acts of profound affection, carved into the very refuse of daily life, yet carrying immense emotional weight. Sex, for these ordinary Egyptians, wasn't regulated by priests or political decrees. It was too fundamental, too natural for rigid control. As long as it was consensual, a key point, and wasn't directly interfering with your work or someone else's marriage contract, a very practical boundary indeed, designed to maintain social order and property rights, it was largely your business. Privacy might have been limited in their close-knit communities. Mud brick walls were thin, allowing sounds to carry, and nosy neighbors, it seems, were an eternal human constant, always ready to observe and comment. Yet intimacy, the sanctity of a couple's private life, was generally respected. You could sense it in the quiet understanding between households, the unspoken acknowledgement of personal space within shared community life, a deference to the private bond. This social understanding formed a subtle, yet effective, barrier against undue intrusion. For many couples, physical affection wasn't hidden. Imagine the feeling of a loved one's hand in yours, the comforting presence of their familiar touch, a simple gesture immortalized on stone walls, suggesting a depth of feeling that transcends millennia. Tomb paintings, surprisingly, sometimes showed husbands and wives touching tenderly, holding hands, or standing face to face in a manner that was clearly not purely ceremonial or symbolic of duty. These weren't stiff, posed representations of obligation. They were portraits of genuine human connection, of affection openly expressed and understood. These were people who genuinely valued companionship, affection, and the quiet comfort of a shared life, understanding that these bonds nourished the soul as much as food nourished the body. The simple, honest depiction of these moments speaks volumes about their grounded approach to human relationships. The Egyptians also understood timing, perhaps with an intuitive wisdom that predated scientific understanding. Fertility mattered a lot, woven into the very fabric of their agricultural society. The Nile flooded predictably, bringing life to the land. Crops had seasons, demanding precise timing for planting and harvest. And so too, they understood, did the human body. Women knew their cycles, often passed down through generations of female wisdom, whispered from mother to daughter. Men had herbal tonics and remedies for various ailments, their efficacy perhaps more symbolic than scientific, but nonetheless believed to aid vitality. And everyone, absolutely everyone, had at least one grandmother with unsolicited advice involving honey, onions, or some other traditional concoction, dispensed with the unwavering certainty of age-old experience and the weight of tradition. Their counsel, however bizarre by modern standards, was a comforting presence, a link to the past, a continuation of ancestral knowledge. Contraception, while certainly not foolproof by modern standards, was part of life. Imagine the conversations, hushed yet practical, among women sharing knowledge of remedies, their voices soft against the sounds of daily life. So too was midwifery, a profession of immense importance and respect, where women assisted other women through the perilous journey of childbirth, their hands steady, their voices calm. There were even rudimentary pregnancy tests involving barley and emmer seeds. If they sprouted after being peed on, congratulations, a new life was on its way. If not, perhaps next year, with a different approach, a renewed sense of hope. These practices, though ancient, reveal a pragmatic and proactive approach to managing family size and ensuring healthy offspring, driven by both personal desire and the demands of their agricultural lifestyle, a profound sense of self-determination. They navigated the challenges of reproduction with ingenuity and collective wisdom. And if things didn't work out romantically, if the shared bed became a source of discord rather than comfort, divorce was possible. There were no drawn-out trials, no public shaming sessions, no complex social repercussions that would trap individuals in unhappy unions. It was simply a split of property, often detailed in that initial marriage contract, a return to separate bread ovens, and the quiet dissolution of a partnership. Imagine the sigh of relief, or perhaps the quiet sorrow, as two people disentangled their lives, moving forward without the burden of a broken bond, free to seek new companionship. This fluidity in their marital customs speaks volumes about their emphasis on practicality and personal well-being over rigid social dogma, valuing harmony even in separation. It showcased a deep understanding that forcing unhappy unions benefited no one. If you're imagining ancient Egyptian weddings with flowing veils, elaborate bouquets, and uncomfortable uncles doing the crocodile dance, you might want to scale it back a lot. The truth is, in ancient Egypt, getting married was delightfully low effort. Picture this: two people simply agreeing to live together. All you really needed was a house, some bread to share, and a mutual tolerance for each other's quirks. A shared bed certainly didn't hurt, providing warmth and intimacy, but there was no grand ceremony, no priest presiding, no registry office to visit, no 47-plate catering menu with chicken, lamb, or divine mystery stew. If two people agreed to live together and shared resources, food, linens, perhaps a goat or two, society accepted them as married. Just like that. Done. A simple yet profound commitment. There were no wedding dresses as we know them. Women wore the same linen garments they wore every other day, usually white, sometimes pleated, always breathable in the desert heat. No rings were exchanged, no elaborate vows were spoken, no emotional groomsmen delivered long-winded speech scrolls. Ancient Egyptian relationships didn't need pageantry. They needed practicality. You had chores to do, after all. The barley wasn't going to thresh itself. The flax wouldn't weave itself into linen. This pragmatic approach underscores their grounded view of partnerships. Marriage was a functional, everyday arrangement, vital for the running of a household and the continuation of society, enduring through the seasons of the Nile and the quiet rhythms of their lives. The essence of commitment lay in shared life, not elaborate displays. That said, couples did sometimes write up marriage contracts, especially in later periods. These were basically ancient prenups, clearly outlining who brought what into the household and who kept what if things went sideways. Imagine the careful hand of a scribe dipping his reed pen into black ink, meticulously recording these details. Occasionally, the contracts even spelled out penalties for bad behavior. Imagine signing a document that stated, "If you hit me, you owe me silver," a tangible consequence for a breach of conduct. Not exactly romantic, but incredibly efficient, and for the time, a remarkably forward-thinking protection for both parties, especially women, ensuring a degree of security in their relationships. These legal frameworks provided stability where emotional ties might falter. These marriage contracts also reinforced women's rights, something ancient Egypt was surprisingly advanced about. Women could own property, a significant marker of independence. They could initiate divorce, giving them agency in their marital status, and even take ex-husbands to court if they tried anything funny with assets or promises. If love was blind, Egyptian law was most definitely not, offering a clear framework for disputes. There wasn't a honeymoon per se, unless you count collapsing after a big feast and hoping no neighbors overheard the fun. But intimacy, affection, and companionship were clearly valued. Marriage wasn't just a transaction, it was a partnership. Ideally, one built on mutual respect and shared responsibilities, enduring through the seasons of the Nile and the quiet rhythms of their lives. This was a bond that evolved, adapted, and ultimately offered a profound sense of belonging and support within the harsh realities of their world, demonstrating a quiet strength in their domestic lives. Chapter 3. The Royal Bedchamber. Power, Purity, and Peculiar Practices. Now, let's step from the humble, sun-drenched homes of the common folk into the gilded, shadow-filled chambers of the royal family. Here, the air itself feels different, heavy with the scent of costly incense, the faint metallic tang of ambition, and the whispers of power. If your first reaction to hearing that Egyptian pharaohs married their sisters is a "wait, what?", you are absolutely not alone. Most modern humans respond the same way. The concept feels deeply unsettling, even taboo for us. But in ancient Egypt, among royalty, sibling marriage wasn't just tolerated, it was, quite remarkably, expected. Imagine the hushed corridors of a grand palace, the rustle of fine linen garments, the distant chime of a bell, signaling a royal presence. This wasn't about romantic love as we understand it, nor was it about personal attraction. This was, first and foremost, a political move, an act of power consolidation on a cosmic scale, intricately woven into their divine understanding of the universe. The very foundation of the kingdom rested on these sacred, yet unsettling, marital bonds. To truly grasp this eyebrow-raising tradition, you have to try and think like a pharaoh. Imagine you genuinely believe your family is descended from gods, and not in some vague metaphorical divine right way, but literally. You are a living god, or at least a direct descendant, imbued with divine essence, a sacred spark within you that links you directly to the creators of the cosmos. If the gods themselves married their siblings, as many myths recounted, to maintain cosmic order and purity, to ensure the continuity of creation, then obviously the royal family, those chosen to mirror the divine on earth, should do the same. Because nothing, absolutely nothing, says eternal stability and sacred continuity quite like awkward family reunions that double as wedding receptions, all in the service of maintaining an unblemished divine lineage. The pressure to conform to this divine pattern was immense, a constant reminder of their unique and burdensome role. This tradition was less about affection and more about keeping the divine bloodline pure and the assets firmly in-house. Pharaohs did not want outsiders, even highly noble ones, gaining access to the throne or diluting their sacred lineage. The throne was not merely a seat of power, it was a sacred conduit between the human and divine realms, and its purity had to be uncompromised. Marrying a sister or a half-sister was the most effective way to ensure that power, wealth, and spiritual authority remained concentrated within the immediate royal family, preventing any claims from rival noble houses. Essentially, royal Egypt ran on a unique combination of profound divine mythology and highly practical dynastic trust issues, a constant vigilance against usurpation or dilution of power. The very idea of an outsider, no matter how powerful or loyal, marrying into the ruling family and potentially claiming a share of the divine right to rule was anathema, a fundamental threat to the stability of the entire kingdom, creating a claustrophobic web of power within the family itself. Consider some of the most famous pharaohs who followed this tradition. Tutankhamun, the boy king whose golden burial mask mesmerized the world, evoking images of unimaginable wealth and majesty, was himself born from a brother-sister union. Modern DNA analysis has confirmed this startling fact, stripping away some of the ancient mystique with cold, hard science. And, spoiler alert, it didn't exactly turn out great for young Tut. He suffered from numerous congenital issues, including a club foot making walking difficult and painful, and a fragile immune system, leaving him vulnerable to disease, which contributed to his early death. This medical reality offers a stark counterpoint to the theological justification, suggesting that repeating the family tree too many times, even for divine reasons, might indeed come with significant biological consequences. It's a sobering reminder that even god-kings were subject to the laws of biology, a fascinating paradox within their belief system that highlights the tension between ideal and reality, between divine will and biological fact. Meanwhile, it's crucial to understand that commoners were absolutely not partaking in this trend. Imagine the scandal, the sheer impossibility of such an arrangement in a normal village. Most regular Egyptians married outside their immediate families, like sane, functioning people, seeking new alliances and fresh bloodlines. Cousin marriage occasionally happened in rural areas, often for practical reasons like keeping land within the family or consolidating resources. But brother-sister unions were strictly reserved for the folks with gold masks, elaborate burial boats, and a direct line to the divine. Even among royals, the practice could cause internal family problems, as rivalries for power and influence inevitably arose, leading to whispered intrigues and subtle betrayals within the royal court. When Cleopatra, yes, that Cleopatra, took the throne, she technically married her brothers, plural, as per custom, a legal formality. But she ruled largely alone, and later aligned herself with powerful Roman men like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, who were thankfully not related to her. Her pragmatic approach, even within the confines of royal tradition, highlighted the tensions inherent in such arrangements and her willingness to bend ancient customs to serve her own ambition, always prioritizing the survival and expansion of her dynasty. To us, the whole concept seems bizarre and, medically speaking, profoundly unwise. But to the ancient Egyptian elite, it was simply tradition wrapped in God-complex logic. Divine bloodlines had to stay divine, even if it meant sacrificing a bit of genetic variety in the royal gene pool. It was a world where belief and power intersected in ways that defy modern understanding, where the most intimate family bonds were twisted to serve the relentless demands of the state and the perceived will of the gods. As you consider this ancient practice, let the strangeness of it settle, understanding that what seems peculiar to one culture can be entirely logical to another, especially when divine authority is invoked and power is absolute. Feel the weight of these ancient traditions, the pressure of a dynasty's demands, a burden that few could ever truly comprehend. Now let's pivot from the very particular rules of royal marriage to a more general aspect of Egyptian relationships, fidelity, and its occasional, very human failures. You might assume, given the emphasis on order and divine harmony, that ancient Egyptians valued fidelity above all else. And indeed, in theory, they did. Texts often praised loyalty and harmonious household. In practice, however, things were a little more flexible, particularly if you were wealthy, powerful, or simply had very convincing excuses and the means to smooth things over. Wealth and status often provided a shield from the full weight of social judgment, allowing a different set of rules to apply. Adultery, like many social sins, wasn't always a criminal offense for everyday folks. For them, it was more of a reputational hazard than a legal disaster. If you got caught cheating, people would talk, loudly and probably in verse, their voices carrying across the village square. Imagine the village gossip, a ripple of whispers and knowing glances, a subtle but pervasive social punishment, as news spread through the community like wildfire. But unless someone's livestock or inheritance was directly affected, or a clear property dispute arose from the entanglement, the government wasn't rushing in to punish your escapades. The social cost was often the primary deterrent, a form of public shaming that could be more effective than a formal punishment in a tight-knit community, where reputation was everything and public opinion held considerable sway over one's standing. However, if you were a married woman caught in adultery, the consequences could indeed be harsher, both socially and economically, if not always legally. Egyptian society was patriarchal, but not aggressively so, allowing women significant rights in many areas. Yet, a woman's fidelity was often tied to questions of paternity, inheritance, and her general standing as someone who didn't cause chaos during harvest season, disrupting the stability of the household and its future. Accusations of infidelity could lead to divorce, public shame that echoed through the marketplaces, and in rarer, more severe cases, punishment like beatings or banishment, particularly in elite households where family honor was a full-time job and a very public spectacle, with every misstep scrutinized by rivals and potentially impacting political alliances. The reputation of the family, especially for noble women, was paramount, and a scandal could reverberate through generations, impacting alliances and status for entire lineages, a constant heavy burden. Men, meanwhile, had more wiggle room. A married man sleeping with an unmarried woman was mostly shrugged off, perhaps with a knowing smirk or a casual remark among friends, rarely leading to serious repercussions. A married man with another married woman, now that was messy, especially if the other husband was important and not into sharing. Jealousy, it seems, has never been confined to any one century or any specific culture. It's a deeply human emotion that transcends time, capable of sparking intense conflict and sometimes even violence, irrespective of social status. Texts from the New Kingdom period mention moral expectations and the importance of a good reputation, though the punishments for men were often less severe or more easily circumvented, reflecting the gender imbalances of the time. In some stories, adulterers are described as foolish or dishonorable, while others suggest that a man who sleeps with another man's wife will face a tragic fate, usually involving curses, impotence, or angry gods with jackal heads, a divine retribution rather than a legal one. The fear of divine disapproval was a powerful unseen force, even if earthly laws were lax. Still, the absence of strict, pervasive laws against adultery in most periods is telling. The Egyptians didn't feel the need to legislate every affair. They relied more on social shame, local gossip, and the occasional passive-aggressive song lyric about a wandering spouse, sung softly so as to be heard but not directly confrontational. And as you might expect from human nature, it worked about as well as it always does. Imperfectly, with plenty of room for both hypocrisy and quiet understanding, a nuanced reality far from simple moral binaries. The delicate balance of community opinion and personal consequence often dictated outcomes more than any codified law. If a marriage did break down due to infidelity or for any other reason, the divorce process wasn't overly complicated, again reflecting their pragmatic approach. Property would be split, often according to the terms of that initial marriage contract, ensuring a fair division of assets. And the community would collectively pretend they weren't watching with intense interest as two lives disentangled, moving on with quiet dignity. Children typically stayed with the mother, especially if they were young, acknowledging the primary role of women in child rearing and care. This relative ease of divorce further highlights the Egyptian focus on practical outcomes and social harmony over rigid moralistic pronouncements about the permanence of marriage, valuing the well-being of individuals within their societal framework. It was a system designed for resilience, allowing people to move forward even after personal setbacks. Chapter 4. Art, Poetry, and the Unveiling of Intimacy. If you assume all ancient Egyptian art was solemn statues, stiff postures, and endless profile views, you're technically right. Unless, of course, you've seen the Turin erotic papyrus. Then you realize, oh, they had jokes and very detailed anatomy. Imagine the quiet reverence of a temple, the colossal statues of gods and pharaohs standing stoically, their gaze fixed on eternity, their faces serene and impassive. Yet this culture, known for its restraint and idealized forms, was not immune to a surprising cheekiness, a playful side that occasionally bubbled to the surface like effervescent wine. Sex, after all, wasn't taboo, so occasionally the artist stopped carving falcons and began sketching something a bit more animated, something that would raise an eyebrow or elicit a knowing chuckle. They recognized the full spectrum of human experience, from the sacred to the bawdy, and found ways to express it, often with subtle wit and charming directness. The most infamous example is the Turin papyrus, now tucked away in an Italian museum like a naughty secret, a tantalizing glimpse into a more uninhibited side of ancient Egyptian life. It's believed to date to around 1150 BCE, a period when the New Kingdom was at its zenith, a time of immense prosperity and cultural flourishing. And it contains explicit scenes, not vague mythological winks. We're talking graphic illustrations of men and women in various amorous and sometimes acrobatic positions, including one gentleman balancing, quite remarkably, on an amphora, a large storage jar. Is it symbolic, perhaps representing abundance or a challenge to convention? Is it just showing off, a display of physical prowess mixed with desire? Scholars still debate whether this papyrus was satire, pure erotica, or a mischievous combination of both. Some suggest it was made to entertain, perhaps even a bachelor's gift for someone with a questionable sense of humor or a particularly adventurous spirit, a playful send-off into married life. Others propose it was a parody, an artistic prank, poking fun at how obsessed people were with fertility, virility, and the elaborate wigs that defined their fashion, a gentle mockery of societal preoccupations. Whatever its original purpose, it stands as a unique testament to a society that, while generally decorous, understood the human urge for visual stimulation and humor, even when it veered into the explicitly physical and unrestrained. The very material of papyrus, delicate and easily concealed, hints at its private, perhaps even illicit nature. Aside from this delightful outlier, most Egyptian erotic art was symbolic, not explicit. Temples didn't feature Kama Sutra frescoes. They displayed fertility motifs, sacred imagery, and occasional nudes representing rebirth, creation, or divine femininity. Imagine walking through a temple corridor, seeing these powerful yet restrained images on the walls, their meaning clear without being overt. Goddesses like Hathor and fertility deities like Min were often shown nude, but in a reverent, powerful way, embodying life-giving force rather than inciting prurience. Men, for instance, is always depicted standing tall, if you catch the drift, holding his signature symbol like a divine badge of honor, an undeniable representation of his power to generate life and abundance. These images weren't meant to scandalize, they were meant to inspire awe and devotion, linking human fertility to the cosmic order, to the very cycle of existence, a visual testament to the power of creation. Then there's the subtle, pervasive use of humor and sexuality in marginal drawings. Imagine the scribes, perhaps a little bored after transcribing long administrative texts, or maybe just feeling playful, adding animals behaving like people, exaggerated gestures, and flirty little side sketches on workers' ostraca, limestone flakes used like sticky notes for notes, accounts, and casual doodles. These were the ancient equivalent of doodling in your notebook when the foreman wasn't looking, a light-hearted release that suggests a culture comfortable enough with its own sexuality to laugh about it, to find humor in the everyday expressions of desire. Eroticism in Egyptian art wasn't meant to shock or scandalize. It was simply another part of life, occasionally celebrated, often ritualized, and sometimes wonderfully, hilariously over the top. These weren't repressed people. They just had an excellent sense of boundaries and, occasionally, a day where they decided the scroll needed a little spice, a touch of human zest, a playful nod to the universal experience of attraction. The immediacy of these fleeting sketches offers a wonderfully candid glimpse into their informal artistic practices and everyday sensibilities. If your idea of ancient love poetry conjures up stiff, chiseled metaphors like "your beauty is like a grain silo," think again. The Egyptians may have carved hieroglyphs into stone, precise and angular, but their romantic writing was anything but rigid. These people knew how to flirt with ink, with style, and occasionally with absolutely no chill, expressing their passion with remarkable directness. Preserved on papyri, delicate and fragile, and broken pottery shards, because nothing says eternal love like a reused cereal bowl, a humble vessel bearing profound sentiment, Egyptian love poems date mostly to the New Kingdom period, around 1300 BCE. And they are refreshingly honest, surprisingly passionate, and occasionally so steamy you'd think they were written during a Nile flood, with nothing better to do than chase desire, their words as intoxicating as the overflowing river. The warmth of the sun and the abundance of the land seem to flow through their verses, enriching their expressions of affection. Here's a genuine line from one such poem, straight from the ancient sands, speaking across millennia. "I shall lie down at home and pretend to be sick, then you will come and see me. And if you come near me, I will get better." This isn't vague romanticism. This is flirtation with a very clear, very charming plan, a playful manipulation to achieve a desired intimacy. It speaks volumes about the directness and playfulness of their romantic interactions. Both men and women composed these poems, often from a first-person perspective, which is rare for the ancient world, offering an intimate glimpse into their desires and vulnerabilities, a personal voice emerging from the mists of time. In Egypt, a young woman could describe the thrilling sensation of sneaking glances across the lotus pond, her heart fluttering like a bird's wing, her senses alive with anticipation. A young man could wax poetic about how her voice was better than beer, a potent compliment in a culture where beer was a staple, a level of devotion that, in ancient Egypt, truly deserved a monument, a declaration of preference above all common pleasures. These weren't just private diary entries either. Some of them were performed at banquets, read aloud for entertainment, as a form of courtship, or just to fill awkward silences between harp solos, the gentle strumming setting a mood for romance. Imagine ancient Tinder dates with live readings of passionate stanzas, followed by wine and maybe a goat roast under the stars, a vibrant social scene where poetry was a living, breathing art form, central to connection and shared joy. And the metaphors, oh, they went all in, weaving rich imagery from their natural world into their expressions of desire. Fruit symbolized sensuality, its sweetness and juiciness evoking forbidden delights, the very essence of pleasure. Hunting meant pursuit and seduction, a playful chase of desire, the thrill of the chase mirrored in the dance of courtship. Gardens and rivers were, well, not always about agriculture. They were often landscapes of love, lush and fertile settings for romantic encounters, where two souls could meet amidst beauty and abundance. These poems aren't afraid to mix earthy, grounded affection with cosmic-level adoration. Desire wasn't something to be repressed, it was to be sung about, written down, and possibly recited by that one cousin who always read too slowly, lingering on every delicious word, savoring its every nuance. The enduring power of these ancient words truly transcend time, connecting us to their passions. As you picture these scenes, the passionate words echoing through the desert air, let your mind drift to the unusual things they believed to enhance desire. When you think of aphrodisiacs, you probably imagine oysters, chocolate, or a fine wine. Not salad. But in ancient Egypt, if someone brought you a bouquet of lettuce, they weren't thinking about fiber, they were absolutely flirting. Specifically, they were invoking the power of Min, the Egyptian god of fertility, who, for reasons that are equal parts symbolic and suspicious, was closely associated with Roma lettuce. Yes, Roma, not just your average Caesar garnish. This stuff was sacred, elevated to a divine symbol. The reason? Well, unlike the floppy, wilting varieties we toss into sad lunch bowls today, Egyptian lettuce stood upright and, when cut, oozed a milky white sap. And if that didn't trigger some highly suggestive divine symbolism, nothing would. Ancient priests looked at that and thought, now that is clearly the embodiment of male potency. Naturally, lettuce was regularly offered to Min during fertility rituals. His statues typically featured him in a, let's say, alert state, holding his signature attribute in one hand and a lettuce stalk in the other. Art historians have had a field day with that pairing for centuries, marveling at the directness of the symbolism and the ancient mind's ability to find meaning in the most unexpected places. At fertility festivals, worshippers would present bundles of lettuce at his temple, hoping to gain his favor for increased virility, a healthy pregnancy, or just a bit of romantic luck. Min was basically the ancient Egyptian version of a dating app algorithm. Worship him correctly, and your chances might just improve. A blend of ritual and practical aspiration. Interestingly, there's evidence that the lettuce was also believed to have medicinal properties, particularly for promoting sexual health. Whether it actually worked or just led to fresher breath before a date is debatable, but the belief was strong. But the symbolism stuck, deeply embedded in their cultural consciousness. And this wasn't just a passing trend. Lettuce appears in art, hieroglyphics, and even offerings in tombs, as if to say, please ensure I continue enjoying pleasure in the afterlife and maybe pack a salad. A practical request even for eternity. It's worth noting that the ancient Egyptians were big fans of natural symbolism. From the Nile's life-giving floods to the lotus flower's daily blooming cycle, the physical world mirrored their spiritual beliefs, every aspect of nature imbued with deeper meaning. So when a vegetable started acting a little extra, you best believe it got promoted to mystical status, a testament to their imaginative and holistic worldview, where the mundane and the sacred were often intertwined. Feel the soft hum of the fan, the quiet rhythm of your breath, as you drift deeper into rest, preparing for our next journey into their practical approaches to managing life's most fundamental mysteries, from conception to childbirth. Chapter 5. Managing Life's Rhythms, Fertility, Contraception, and New Beginnings. As the quiet stillness of your room settles around you, let's explore how the ancient Egyptians, living in a world without modern science, approached the profound and often challenging rhythms of human reproduction. Having children wasn't just desirable in their society, it was a social expectation, a spiritual duty, and, if you were lucky, a way to ensure someone would faithfully refill your tomb offerings long after you were gone, ensuring your sustenance in the afterlife. So when a couple struggled to conceive, it wasn't brushed aside. It was investigated, medically, magically, and sometimes both in the same afternoon. So when a couple struggled to conceive, it wasn't brushed aside. It was investigated, medically, magically, and sometimes both in the same afternoon. Imagine the anxieties, the hopes, the desperate prayers that would accompany such a struggle, in a time when understanding the human body was largely based on observation, intuition, and a profound connection to the divine, rather than scientific dissection. The weight of societal expectation, intertwined with personal longing, would have been immense, a quiet ache in the heart of many families. The ancient Egyptians approached infertility with characteristic pragmatism, blending what they understood of medicine with their deep-seated belief in divine intervention. Their medical papyri, particularly the Cahun gynecological papyrus, dating to a remarkable 1800 BCE, include detailed diagnoses, treatments, and methods for evaluating female fertility. These aren't just vague incantations. They contain practical instructions for examining cervical mucus, monitoring cycles, and even a primitive pregnancy test involving urinating on barley and emmer wheat. Imagine the hopeful anticipation, the careful observation of tiny sprouts. If the grain sprouted, congratulations! Your household was about to get louder, a new voice joining the chorus of family life. If not, the next step might involve inserting herbal mixtures, fumigating the womb, yes, really, perhaps with fragrant resins or potent herbs, or appealing to higher powers, offering prayers and sacrifices to sympathetic deities. Because in Egypt, if medicine didn't work, magic was always available, and often recommended, a complementary approach to healing that saw no conflict between the physical and the spiritual, believing that all forces were interconnected. The scent of burning incense might mingle with the aroma of herbs, creating an atmosphere of holistic healing. Amulets played a central, comforting role in these personal journeys. Imagine holding a small, smooth carving, feeling its contours in your palm, drawing strength from its ancient power. Symbols of Hathor, the goddess of love and fertility. Isis, the great mother and healer, whose magic brought Osiris back from the dead. Bes, the dwarf god, protector of households, mothers, and childbirth, with his fierce yet comical visage. Or Taweret, the hippopotamus-shaped protector of childbirth, with her swollen belly and powerful stance, were worn on the body, carried in pouches, or placed under pillows, whispering silent promises of protection and fruitfulness. Spells were recited, ancient words imbued with power. Figurines of deities were buried near homes or cradled in hopes of divine intercession. One text suggests that to conceive, a woman should drink a concoction of ground dates, honey, and carob while reciting a protective charm. Not FDA approved, perhaps, but deeply heartfelt and brimming with a blend of practical herbalism and profound faith, demonstrating a holistic approach to wellness. The ritualistic nature of these practices offered psychological comfort as much as potential physical aid. Men, of course, weren't off the hook, though far fewer papyri bother to question their reproductive contributions, reflecting a common societal bias that often placed the burden of fertility squarely on women. In cases of persistent infertility, a man might be told to undergo purification rituals, a cleansing of body and spirit, consult a priest for divine guidance, or, in less official advice, simply try harder, a rather unhelpful but probably common suggestion. And because this was Egypt, cosmic order, Ma'at, was always part of the equation. A childless couple might be seen as unbalanced, their household lacking harmony, or even cursed, perhaps by an offense to the gods or a disruption of natural order. But society didn't shun them. Instead, it offered remedies, hope, and a few very creative prescriptions, demonstrating a compassionate and community-oriented approach to personal struggle, recognizing the universal human desire for offspring, and providing support in various forms. It's worth noting that despite all this effort, Egyptian households weren't necessarily overflowing with children. High infant mortality rates, prevalent diseases like dysentery and smallpox, and malnutrition kept family sizes smaller than ideal, even with constant pregnancies. This harsh reality only made fertility all the more sacred, and its absence all the more personal, intensifying the longing for new life. The desire for children was not just cultural, it was an innate human drive, amplified by the precariousness of life itself, a constant struggle against the odds. Every surviving child was a precious gift, a testament to resilience and perhaps divine favor, cherished amidst the ever-present threat of loss. When it came to preventing pregnancy, the ancient Egyptians employed methods that were imaginative, herbal, and occasionally quite alarming. Without access to modern science, without microscopes to see tiny cells or complex chemical compounds, they relied on natural substances, accumulated wisdom passed down through generations, and texts like the Ebers Papyrus, one of the earliest surviving medical documents, dating to a remarkable 1550 BCE. Imagine the quiet confidence of a midwife, her hands rough but gentle, sharing secrets gleaned from centuries of women's experiences, her voice a comforting murmur, her hands practiced and sure. One of the more infamous prescriptions involved crocodile dung mixed with honey and sourdough. This concoction was inserted vaginally as a form of barrier contraceptive. While modern readers may recoil at the thought, the idea was not entirely without a primitive logic. The mixture likely created an acidic or obstructive environment, similar in theory to some modern spermicides or barrier methods. The honey would have helped bind the mixture and potentially provided some antimicrobial properties. Whether it was truly effective is unclear, but whether it was unpleasant is much easier to guess. One can only imagine the smell, the texture, and the sheer discomfort involved, a testament to the lengths women would go to control their fertility and navigate the challenges of their reproductive lives, driven by a deep need for agency over their own bodies. More promising and scientifically aligned was the use of acacia gum. This plant extract, as later science confirmed, ferments into lactic acid, a compound that does in fact have spermicidal qualities, creating an acidic environment hostile to sperm. Combined with other ingredients like honey and dates, it formed a kind of early pessary, a vaginal insert designed to block or disable sperm. It's one of the few ancient remedies that could arguably pass a very lenient clinical trial, highlighting a surprising empirical streak in their medical practices, a testament to their keen observation of natural phenomena. These methods suggest that Egyptian women, who had notable legal and medical agency for the time, took active roles in managing reproduction, a stark contrast to many societies where women's bodies were solely the domain of men or religious authority. The knowledge and use of these materials would have been common knowledge among midwives, healers, and women within the household, passed down from mother to daughter, an intimate treasury of practical wisdom, carefully guarded and shared among women, a quiet, powerful network of female knowledge. Beyond physical remedies, there were also ritual and spiritual approaches. Women might appeal to fertility deities like Isis, Hathor, or Bes, seeking either conception or its delay, their prayers heartfelt and earnest. Magical amulets and incantations were used alongside practical remedies, blurring the line between medicine and religion, as was typical in most aspects of Egyptian life, where the spiritual and the material were deeply intertwined. Imagine the fervent prayers whispered in the quiet of a temple, the small offerings laid at a shrine, the hope woven into every ritual, a tangible expression of their deepest desires. The rustle of a priestess's linen robes, the faint scent of myrrh, would add to the solemnity and hope of these moments. In addition to preventing pregnancy, Egyptian medical texts contain instructions for inducing menstruation, treating infertility, and even early pregnancy detection using barley and emmer grains exposed to urine, a method surprisingly accurate in some cases, responding to the presence of hormones in the urine, long before the scientific understanding of hormones existed. In the absence of modern tools, these practices reveal a culture deeply invested in understanding and influencing the human body. They lacked microscopes, but not intention. Fertility was a matter of life, death, economics, and divine favor, a cornerstone of their civilization, central to the well-being of the family and the state. And while some of their methods may now seem outlandish, the impulse behind them, to plan, to protect, to prepare, is strikingly familiar, echoing the universal human desire for control over one's destiny and the continuation of one's lineage. As you feel your body relax more deeply into the surface beneath you, allow these ancient wisdoms and struggles to gently fade, preparing for our next exploration of societal norms, particularly those surrounding personal purity and diverse forms of love. Chapter 6: Beyond Conventions, Virginity and Diverse Desires. As the quiet darkness of your room deepens and your breathing grows slow and even, let's dismantle another modern assumption, one that often projects our own societal hang-ups onto the past. The concept of virginity. In ancient Egypt, virginity wasn't a badge of honor, a social currency, or a fragile family heirloom to be guarded at all costs. In fact, it wasn't really a big deal at all, more like a passing footnote in the grander narrative of life, which mostly revolved around crops, inheritance, and not angering the gods before breakfast. Imagine a society where the weight of judgment you might expect simply isn't there, freeing individuals from anxieties that plague many cultures, both past and present. A liberating sense of freedom from a common burden, allowing individuals to define their worth by their actions and contributions rather than a specific physical state. There's no known Egyptian word for virgin in the moralistic, ceremonial sense we might understand it today. The closest you'll find are terms that mean young woman or uninitiated, which is less about purity culture and more about simply hasn't had the time yet or hasn't experienced sexual intimacy, a neutral observation rather than a moral classification. No torches were lit, no elaborate ceremonies performed to celebrate or verify a woman's premarital state, and no mothers-in-law inspecting linens like they were looking for counterfeit currency on a wedding night, demanding proof of an unblemished past. This wasn't because the Egyptians were scandalous libertines, it's just that they had a far more functional and integrated approach to sex. It was seen as part of life, like eating bread, drinking beer, or skillfully avoiding hippos in the Nile. Important, yes, sacred, sometimes, but nothing that required a purity certificate stamped by a temple priest or an elaborate public declaration, nor was it something that dictated a woman's entire social standing. For women, value came from things like fertility, the ability to bear children and continue the family line, ensuring the future of the household and its legacy. Loyalty to her husband and household, demonstrating stability and commitment, and whether she could competently run a household without the roof catching fire or the granaries being depleted. Practical skills that ensured survival and prosperity. Her sexual history was largely her business, a private matter that did not define her worth in the wider community, unless it directly impacted her ability to fulfill her societal role. Marriage wasn't about sealing a chaste deal. It was about forming a reliable alliance, a partnership that could ideally survive tax season, the annual floods, and the occasional plague of locusts, all the myriad challenges of ancient life. Practicality once again trumped abstract moral codes, emphasizing mutual benefit over rigid idealization, making the partnership endure through shared effort and respect. Of course, modesty existed. People didn't walk around advertising their conquests on papyrus scrolls, nor was there a lack of social decorum. Social interactions still had their rules, their unspoken understandings. But the kind of ritual obsession with virginity found in later societies, particularly those influenced by Abrahamic religions, just didn't materialize here. There was no cloistering of young women, isolating them to protect their supposed purity. No dowries were strictly based on moral performance, valuing chastity above all else. No uncles making awkward virtue-signaling speeches at family gatherings, creating discomfort for everyone. Even Egyptian religion offered little support for the whole purity panic. The goddess Hathor, patron of love, music, and wine, was openly sensual, depicted often in a manner that celebrated desire, and seemed extremely unbothered by anyone's opinions on sexual modesty. She embodied pleasure and abundance, not repression. The gods were far too busy managing creation, cosmic balance, and their own dramatic love lives to weigh in on who had done what, when, and with whom, leaving human behavior to largely regulate itself through social norms rather than divine decree. In the end, virginity in ancient Egypt was treated for what it is, a temporary condition, not a lifelong resume point or a marker of moral superiority. And frankly, they seemed more concerned with who could bake good bread, a vital skill for feeding a family, and whether your father had a reliable roof to offer, ensuring shelter and security. Because when you live in a desert surrounded by crocodiles, you learn pretty quickly what really matters and what absolutely doesn't. Now, let's allow our minds to consider another area where ancient Egyptian society displayed a remarkable degree of openness and pragmatism, contrasting sharply with the norms of many other historical periods: the existence of same-sex relationships. Ancient Egyptian society, while certainly not publishing rainbow flags or holding parades in the modern sense, also didn't seem particularly troubled by the existence of same-sex relationships. There were no official laws condemning them, no public stonings or brutal punishments, and most tellingly, no frenzied temple sermons about the end of civilization being brought on by two men sharing a bedroll. This quiet acceptance, or perhaps pragmatic indifference, is a striking contrast to many other ancient cultures, and certainly to later periods of history where such relationships were harshly condemned and severely punished. It suggests a focus on broader societal function rather than strict moral policing of private lives, allowing for a diverse range of personal arrangements. The most discussed and perhaps compelling example is that of Nyankhnum and Khnum-Hotep, two high-ranking officials from the 5th dynasty, dating back to around 2400 BCE. They were buried together in a shared tomb at Saqqara, a unique and highly significant arrangement for non-royal individuals, signifying a deep and lasting bond that transcended typical professional or even familial ties. Their tomb features intimate artwork, the pair embracing, touching noses, a gesture equivalent to a kiss in ancient Egypt, signifying profound affection and intimacy, and generally behaving like a couple whose biggest argument was probably about linen colors or the best blend of beer for the evening meal. The inscriptions refer to them as overseers of the manicurists, which sounds innocuous until you realize they were clearly close enough to be buried as one household unit, a privilege usually reserved for married couples, implying a familial bond beyond mere professional collegiality. Were they lovers? Were they roommates with exceptional boundaries, displaying an unusually deep platonic friendship? Were they brothers, unusually fond of holding hands? Scholars still debate, and definitive proof remains elusive, as the language and cultural context are open to interpretation. But the visual language leans heavily in favor of a romantic, or at least deeply affectionate bond, one that transcended simple friendship. And the fact that their tomb exists, beautifully decorated and publicly visible, without any apparent attempts at effacement or condemnation, suggests that nobody was outraged or felt the need to censor their relationship. They were important, respected, and apparently allowed to be themselves, even in death, their unique bond acknowledged for eternity by the very permanence of their shared monument. Egyptian texts and mythology also leave space for fluidity in gender and identity. Some deities, like Hapi, the god of the Nile's annual flood, are depicted as intersex or androgynine, embodying both male and female characteristics, blurring the rigid lines of gender as we often perceive them. But the visual language leans heavily in favor of a romantic, or at least deeply affectionate bond, one that transcended simple friendship. And the fact that their tomb exists, beautifully decorated and publicly visible, without any apparent attempts at effacement or condemnation, suggests that nobody was outraged or felt the need to censor their relationship. They were important, respected, and apparently allowed to be themselves, even in death, their unique bond acknowledged for eternity by the very permanence of their shared monument. Others take on dual roles or switch genders in mythological tales without causing divine HR complaints, illustrating a divine realm unburdened by human categories and societal restrictions. The gods, it seems, were not limited by human categories, and neither were the people invoking them. This divine fluidity likely contributed to a broader cultural acceptance of human variation in gender expression and sexual preference, a more expansive view of identity than many cultures would later adopt, embracing the full spectrum of human experience and reflecting it in their sacred narratives. That said, it is important to note that there's no explicit evidence of organized same-sex marriages or formal political recognition of same-gender unions as we might understand them today, with legal rights and social ceremonies. The Egyptians were pragmatic. If a relationship produced heirs and ensured property stability, benefiting the household and the community, great. If it didn't, well, that was largely your household's business, as long as it didn't disrupt the wider social order or create inheritance disputes over land or wealth. Intimacy, as always, was treated with a curious mix of privacy and normalcy, a personal affair within a broader societal structure that largely allowed for diverse arrangements, so long as they didn't undermine core societal functions. And while male same-sex relations are more visible in the records, perhaps because men held more public roles and thus left more written records, or perhaps because their relationships were less constrained by procreative expectations tied to lineage, female ones are almost completely absent from the surviving texts and art. This isn't because they didn't happen, but because Egyptian scribes, unfortunately, had a frustrating habit of ignoring what women did when no men were around, leading to significant gaps in our understanding of female relationships and their expressions of love and companionship. A silent void in the historical record that leaves us to wonder and infer about the full tapestry of ancient Egyptian lives. As you breathe deeply, feeling the gentle rhythm of your own body, consider this ancient world where human desire, in all its forms, was largely viewed through a lens of naturalness rather than moral judgment. Virginity was not an obsession, and diverse relationships, while perhaps not formally codified, were certainly not condemned. It reflects a society remarkably free from many of the sexual hang-ups that have plagued other cultures throughout history, offering a refreshing perspective on human acceptance. Allow these thoughts to settle gently as we prepare to explore the ultimate continuation of life and love in the Egyptian afterlife, where desire, too, was believed to transcend death, ensuring a complete and vibrant existence. Chapter 7. Love's Eternal Embrace, Sexuality in the Afterlife. As the last tendrils of wakefulness begin to loosen their grip, and you feel yourself drifting, suspended in a peaceful calm, let's conclude our journey through ancient Egypt by exploring perhaps their most profound and comforting belief: the continuation of life and, indeed, love and desire beyond the veil of death. If you think desire fades after death, the ancient Egyptians would like a word, and possibly a carefully carved offering slab brimming with food and drink for the journey. In their worldview, death wasn't an end. It was a continuation of life, ideally with all the comforts, pleasures, and daily routines of the living world, including sex. Imagine an eternal existence, not as a static, ethereal state, a distant, unknowable void, but as a vibrant, idealized version of the life you cherished, filled with familiar joys, pleasures, and connections, perfected and endless. The very concept offered immense solace, transforming the dread of an ending into the anticipation of a glorious continuation. The scent of fresh lotus blossoms and the murmur of flowing water might fill this paradise. Funerary texts, meticulously inscribed on papyrus and tomb walls, tomb inscriptions carved with care and precision, and grave goods carefully selected and placed within the burial chamber, all suggest that the deceased hoped to carry their appetites into the afterlife. Not just for bread and beer, which were abundantly provided as offerings to sustain the ka and ba, the soul's aspects, but for love, touch, and intimacy. Imagine feeling the familiar warmth of a loved one's hand, hearing their voice, sharing moments of profound connection that death could not sever. Because, frankly, what's the point of eternal life if it doesn't include a bit of pleasure, a continuation of the deepest human bonds, the very essence of human connection? Tomb art, meticulously painted and carved for eternity, designed to ensure the deceased's eternal well-being, often depicted couples embracing, holding hands, or standing intimately close, their forms idealized but recognizably human. These weren't just generic stock poses or purely ceremonial gestures. They were deliberate spiritual blueprints, heartfelt messages to the gods. Please restore our bodies, restore our love, and, if possible, restore our bedroom privileges for all eternity. The desire for companionship and physical connection was seen as fundamental, even in the realm of the blessed dead, essential for a complete and joyful existence beyond the grave, a testament to the enduring power of human affection, transcending the boundaries of life and death. And yes, bodily restoration was a serious concern, paramount to their vision of the afterlife. The meticulous process of mummification was not merely about preserving the physical form. It was about ensuring its functionality in the afterlife, ensuring the ka and ba had a suitable vessel to return to. In the Book of the Dead and other mortuary texts, comprehensive guides for navigating the underworld, the deceased are promised their limbs will function perfectly. Their hearts will be weighed fairly by Osiris and Thoth against the feather of Ma'at, ensuring their worthiness, and their, let's say, equipment will be returned intact and fully operational, ready for renewed life and pleasure. There are even explicit references to revivifying certain parts of the anatomy, detailed descriptions ensuring no vital function would be missing. No detail was considered too personal or too base for eternity. The physical form, in all its capacities, was sacred and essential for a complete existence in the field of reeds, their version of paradise. This was a profound understanding of the interconnectedness of body and soul, where the physical was deemed necessary for the spiritual to thrive, a holistic approach to immortality that left nothing to chance. Sexuality, fundamentally, was tied to rebirth, a concept central to Egyptian religion and their understanding of the cosmos. The god Osiris, famously murdered and dismembered by his jealous brother Set, his body scattered across the land, was miraculously reassembled by his devoted wife Isis, her magic and determination boundless. This included a reconstructed phallus, symbolizing his renewed generative power and virility, before he fathered Horus, the son who would avenge him and reclaim his throne. This myth wasn't just a legend. It was a powerful template for human experience, a divine promise of resurrection and renewal, showing that life, even after ultimate destruction, could be remade and repopulated. If the gods resumed intimacy after resurrection, then so too should the rest of us, mirroring the divine pattern in their own eternal lives. This divine example provided immense comfort and reassurance. The cycle of life, death, and rebirth was not just cosmic, but deeply personal, encompassing the renewal of all physical and emotional faculties, a complete restoration of being, ensuring no aspect of their earthly happiness was lost. The very fabric of the cosmos mirrored the intimate hopes of every individual. Some tomb inscriptions even included direct, heartfelt requests to the gods for continued love and intimacy between husband and wife in the field of reeds, the Egyptian version of paradise. Imagine the tender sentiments carved into stone, meant to last forever, expressing a desire for eternal companionship, a shared existence beyond the reach of time and decay. This afterlife was envisioned as a lush, idealized version of earthly life. Fertile land stretching to the horizon, calm waters flowing gently through canals, eternal abundance of crops and resources, and evidently plenty of room for romance and procreation, ensuring the continuation of families and joyful existence. It was not a sterile, purely spiritual realm devoid of earthly delights or physical connection, but a vibrant, living continuation, where all aspects of human joy and connection were preserved and perfected. A rich and sensory paradise that fulfilled every human longing. The sounds of birdsong, the scent of blooming lotuses, the touch of a loved one's hand, all awaited them in this perfect eternal home, a symphony of perpetual pleasure and comfort. While many modern cultures often compartmentalize sex as earthly and mortal, something to be left behind with the physical body in a pursuit of pure spirituality, the Egyptians folded it seamlessly into their afterlife ideology. It wasn't shameful or forgotten. It was another part of the soul's well-being, as essential as food, music, and the blissful absence of having to pay taxes ever again, a truly tempting prospect for eternity. This integration of the physical and spiritual in their vision of the afterlife speaks volumes about their holistic worldview, where the body was simply another vessel for the soul's continued journey. In the end, they hoped for what most people still do: comfort, companionship, and a little joy, even if it took mummification, a complex array of funerary rituals, and a few magical scrolls to get there, ensuring every aspect of their earthly lives would continue. Their vision of eternity was one of wholeness, where body and spirit, love and pleasure continued in perfect harmony, a testament to their profound appreciation for the entirety of human experience and their refusal to diminish any part of it. The darkness of the tomb was merely a temporary passage to a brighter, more fulfilling existence, where every cherished memory and sensation was not only preserved but enhanced, a promise of endless bliss. As we peel back the linen wrappings of ancient Egypt, metaphorically of course, what we find is a civilization that didn't treat the human body as something shameful, sinful, or suspicious. It was seen as natural, powerful, and capable of both divine creation and very human desire. Sex for the Egyptians was not a secret to be hidden. It was a fact of life, discussed in poems, sometimes vividly, depicted in art, and written into the very myths that shaped their worldview. Gods themselves fell in love, flirted, seduced, and occasionally caused fertility-related chaos across the Nile. In a culture where existence flowed from cycles, the flooding of the river, the return of the sun, the rebirth of the soul, sexuality was part of that rhythm, not an interruption of it. They also took a profoundly practical approach, from contraception and fertility treatments to passionate love songs and desires for intimacy in the afterlife. The Egyptians faced physicality head-on, often with more clarity and less neurosis than many societies that came centuries later. There was no hysterical legislation, no moral panic, no need for uncomfortable censorship scribbled in the margins of sacred texts. Just a clear understanding. Bodies do things, people feel things, and the world keeps turning. Importantly, they didn't overthink it. Sex wasn't put on a pedestal, nor was it dragged through the mud. It was part of health, love, family, and sometimes religion, worthy of respect but not surrounded by neurosis. Even their gods, powerful and eternal, didn't shy away from physical form or intimacy. In fact, they embodied it. And while not every practice holds up today, we're looking at you, crocodile dung, the core attitude remains refreshingly modern, or perhaps modernity has just taken 3,000 years to catch up. And maybe that's the legacy worth remembering. A culture that didn't fear the body, didn't vilify desire, and somehow still managed to build pyramids on top of it all. Let the whispers of ancient Egypt fade now, as you settle deeper into the warmth and stillness of your own space. May your dreams be as rich and open as the world we've explored tonight. Good night, and sweet dreams, weary traveler.